What's up, everyone? This is Borra-mon, and we are back to talk about another anime today. This time, we are going to do a full review on the anime Concrete Revolutio. This anime premiered in the fall 2015 season, and I'm only just now getting around to watching it because I am very behind in a lot of my anime watching. I know I'm very bad. But we're going to do a full review today. Alright, so let's give a summary of this anime. So, Concrete Revolutio takes place in an alternate version of our Earth, which takes place about 20 years after their version of World War II. Superhumans exist, any kind you can think of, from aliens to magical girls to transforming robots. Anything you can think about. The problem is even though these superhumans exist, so do their villains, so do all their enemies. And so, in order to counteract the potential threat, the Japanese government has established the Overpopulation Research Lab as a part of the Health and Welfare Ministry of the government. It's also known as the Superhuman Bureau. And our protagonist, Jiro Hitoyoshi, is a part of this bureau. Their mission is to identify and talk to these superhumans and, manage and protect them. So it's kind of got the twofold thing of like they're keeping a tight, firm hand on these superhumans, but they're also protecting them as well. So that's the basic summary of this story. And that's where we start off. So for this full review, we're going to have it divided out into a few categories. We're going to have animation, soundtrack, pacing, characters, and themes. And I'm also going to talk a bit about the plot as well. I decided that the themes and the plot are going to be kind of your non-spoiler and spoiler part of the review. And then, of course, we'll give our final verdict at the end. Alright, so let's jump into the first category, animation. This was animated by Bone Studio, who have also done a lot of good work, such as Origami, Keikai Sensen, Space Dandy, and more recently, Boku no Hero Academia. Now, the animation is really, really good. I was very, very impressed with the animation. It had a really good color palette, right? And sort of I don't really want to say pastel, but it was a brighter color palette, and it really worked well for this anime. And not only that, their action scenes, if you remember from for those of you who have seen it, from like episode 3 or something like that. That fight scene near the end, very, very well animated. Right? So they do the animation on the animation front. This is a very, very high level anime. I am very, very impressed with how its animation was done. Right? And you might just say, well, that's as expected of Bone Studio. They've done a lot of good ones. Noragami has some of the best animation I have seen. I love it to death. And so it should be noted that most of the series that Bone Studio get to doing are going to be very good. Are going to be very well animated. All right, so into the second category is the soundtrack. I loved the soundtrack to this anime. Music was very important to this anime, right? And the reason why we'll talk about when we get to like the themes and plot of the story. But the soundtrack is very important. The opening was pretty hype. I loved the opening, and the ending theme always had a way of me being like it was kind of like it was a slow march to the end. Like it kind of made me feel like we're slowly marching to the point where everything's going to change, and I'm just like it was like gritty almost. It was kind of like gritty. It was just very, very well done. The soundtrack was very, very good, right? For an anime where music plays kind of a focal point to the themes and plot of the story, it did very well of making songs or picking songs that worked well within that idea of it being important to the themes and plot of the story. They did a really good job of creating a very good soundtrack. I was very, very impressed with it, and it also gets high marks. Alright, so getting into the next category, pacing. Now, the pacing of the story is a more interesting conversation. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing about this, right? It does have non-linear storytelling, and this is not what I am, and I liked that. They did very well with it, right? See, people who didn't understand it because of that, they didn't pay attention to the dates, right? They clearly tell you when this is happening, right? Now, if you're not necessarily familiar with how they are doing the dates, it might be confusing. They are doing it based on eras of Japan and the years. So each era, like, you count up from 1 to whatever year it ends it. So when they're talking about the 41st year of the Shinjuku era, I think I'm saying that right. Please, I hope so. Then they're talking like that's like the 1960s or 70s or something like that, right? It's not they're not doing years the same way we do years, right? But you don't even really need to know that. You just need to pay attention to like what year of the era they're talking about, right? So if they're talking about the 41st, and then they switch to a single and say, "Oh, hey, we're talking about this is now the year the 46th year," right? Not too hard to keep track of. You just got to pay attention to the dates. If you do that, the nonlinear storytelling is pretty easy to follow. But getting into the pacing, right? This is separate from the nonlinear storytelling. The pacing was decent. It was not horrible. I've seen shows with absolute shite goddamn pacing. It was just wretched pacing, right? This compared to those shows had great pacing, right? But it also leaves a little to be desired. It leaves a little to be desired in terms of pacing. And the reason I talk about that is because you have, and in the beginning it's fine, but at least the ending. While I loved the ending, the pacing leading up to the ending could have been done a little better. It didn't give quite enough room for the build-up to it, and so sometimes the what's supposed to be the climactic parts weren't as climactic as they should have been. They were still climactic. They weren't anticlimactic, but they weren't as climactic as they could be. So the pacing leaves a little to be desired. For the most part, though, it does well. And I think, and here's the thing about this anime, right? This is really only half of the full story, right? Because we have season 2 coming out, right? Well, it's out right now, and so that's like the second half of the story, right? So there's some of the pacing might make more sense when you take into account the second season, right? But in terms of keeping the first season contained in and of itself, the pacing leaves a little to be desired, and as such, I graded it a little bit more harshly. Right? That being said, it's not bad by any means. So it doesn't take away necessarily from the show as a whole, and to make it like it's not unwatchable. It doesn't make it bad. It's just it could have been better. This kind of thing. It's just like it could have been better. That's how I'm gonna say it. All right, now we're getting into our next category, the characters. Right. Let's start off with our main character, Jiro Hideyoshi. Jiro Hideyoshi is our protagonist, and he's the point man of the Superhuman Bureau. And he's the only real human of the group. Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. No, alright, let's do it. Alright, so let's get into the next category of this review. Characters. Let's start off with our main character, Jiro Hideyoshi. Now, Jiro... damn it. Alright, so let's get into the next category of this review, the characters. Now, let's start off with our main character, Jiro Hideyoshi. He is the point man of Superhero Bureau and the only human of the group. He also drives a nice little car that can transform into a mech. So he is our mech driver of this series. I love the fact that, like, we gotta have all these superhuman abilities and everything, but we still get to see mech fights. I'm like, yes. But Jiro Hideyoshi, he's kind of... He's a complex character. And I enjoy that he is not... He kind of starts off as being kind of a set-in-stone protagonist. Like, when we first meet him, it's definitely like, oh, this is like it's very clear what he thinks is right and what he thinks is wrong, right? He's got a very clear set of values, right? Of course, with the non-linear storytelling, you also get to fast forward into the future where we see him very different from how he is when we first meet him. Very, 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 very different. It seems like, it's almost like he's done a complete 180, right? But as we find, out, it's not necessarily the case, right? He is kind of since he is our vehicle through the story. We also get to see, as especially the points he makes and points other people make, how his sense of justice changes, right? It's coming to the whole, and he is definitely representative of this theme, of that there is that right and wrong are not black and white. It's not set in stone. There's no clear right and there's no clear wrong. Everything is shades of gray, right? And he's our vehicle through that of that theme, and through the story, as it tries to convey that to us, that it's not that things aren't set like that, morals aren't set in stone, that they are malleable, and they are not one way or another. It's always somewhere in the middle. And as such, he's very interesting because of that. His development throughout the season was some of the most entertaining to watch, which is good because he's the main character. A lot of times you get main characters that don't have a lot of substance, and it's fine because they're decent enough to get through the story and everything, and you have all the side characters to make it more interesting. But it's always way better when the main character is engaging and interesting, because he's the main character. He kind of needs to be engaging and interesting to be a good main character, right? And then we have our main heroine, Kiko Hoshino. She is our magical girl, witch or something of the stories. Her powers are very funky. They're very funky, and I enjoy those. She meets Jiro in the first episode, right? So, and she also joins the Superhuman Bureau. And as the main heroine, obviously she develops feelings for the protagonist, as it so happens. And she's also very interesting. She's a curious character. She's kind of like the hope. She has hope, I suppose, and so she's kind of that vehicle of hope throughout the story, right? Even as jaded as some of the other characters get, she has hope, and because of that innocence, it's very interesting to see her exposed to some of the more morally gray aspects of the show as it goes along. Seeing her development was very interesting, and especially when other things were revealed and everything later on in the story, it's very, very good. She does very well as the main heroine. Now we're getting to the next character, Emi Kino. She is a monster, a yokai, right? And she has lived with Jiro since they were young. And her powers include shape-shifting and controlling birds and stuff like that. She also has feelings for Jiro, and hates it when Kiko gets closer. So she's very jealous. She's the jealous type. And so she's curious, because since she's been around Jiro when she's younger, we get to see she's kind of she's known him for longer and everything, and also knows about his past and everything like that. She's an interesting character. She didn't have a ton of development throughout the season, and like I said, this is really only one half to the entire story, and so she'll probably get a lot more development come the second half. But we're treating this as one season. It's contained within itself. So, as such, she's one of the more lacking characters. Even though her character design is very good, and the scenes she in, she does well. It's just, she doesn't necessarily bring any special to the table when you compare it to Jiro and Kiko, and their development throughout the season. Very, very, it kind of pales in comparison. Now we're getting into the next character, Furota. Now, Furota isn't introduced until episode 2, right? And he's a ghost. He's a ghost, and ghosts are I like their take on ghosts. Their take on ghosts is very, very is very good. I like their take. The series takes on ghosts is different from pretty much every other series I've seen that has any sort of ghost in it. Very different. He is like a kid, right? he is like a kid, so he's, he's mischievous and everything, but like, but because of that, we get to see him mature somewhat over the course of the season, right? And seeing him mature, even though it's slight. Like I said, I'm reiterating this for the third time, I know, but only half the story, so there's bound to be more development. But we see that he matures a great bit, especially when we get flash forwards to what's happening in the future, and we get to see him and how he's developed since then. He definitely, seeing him mature like that is very good development. He's also another very good character. Our next character is Hyomo Yoshimura. His powers include stopping time with his watch and also turning into a jaguar. He's a genius physicist, and he created the mech that Jiro uses. He's a really, really interesting character. He actually probably has the best, most interesting backstory out of any of the characters, especially since we don't know much about Jiro's backstory. So he has the most interesting backstory out of any of the characters. Very, very entertaining. He one of my. I mean, I like all these characters, obviously, but one of the best ones. He's like, I place him up there with Jiro as like in terms of like, and it was very interesting too to see his morals kind of develop throughout this season as well. Most of these characters, they have development throughout the season, and a lot of it has to do with how they view things and everything. And so his was also very interesting as well. Yeah, so he's very good. He's a very good character. Like him a lot. And our next character is Daishi Akita, who is the chief of the Superhuman Bureau. I won't get into his abilities because it kind of spoils a little bit. But he's the chief of the Superhuman Bureau, and he doesn't have a lot of he actually has a little bit of development as well throughout the show, but it's towards the very end. His role is mostly just being there and allowing us to see some of the inner workings of the government at times. So he's more than anything vehicle of the plot, kind of. So in some aspect, at least part of the plot, So he's very so he works well as the chief of the story. Just not too much to say about him without really giving some things away. Moving on to our last character we're going to talk about, Raito Shiba, who is not a part of the Superhuman Bureau, but he is an investigator in the police force. He is known as the Superhuman Investigator. He used to be a human, but I forgot what happened to his original body, but now he's in an android body. So he's completely robotic, and he is very much in opposition to the Superhuman Bureau at first, because they cover up evidence of superhumans and everything, and he doesn't like that. He wants to bring the superhumans that do bad things to justice, right? He's all about bringing justice to those who would do wrong in the world, and that includes superhumans. He is also an incredibly interesting character because you get to see he is up there with Jiro in terms of development over the series, in terms of his morals, how his morals change. Especially like I said, with the non-linear storytelling, we see him in the future, and it, like Jiro, is kind of like a 180 kind of deal. It's like, wow, this is very, very different from how he is now, and I gotta say he's a very entertaining character because you get to see. Because he's very, he's very righteous and everything. And so since he's a part of the system, being exposed to the corruption of the system can change your outlook. And so his development is extremely interesting. It's definitely up there in terms of Jiro. I was just as entertained watching him develop as I was Jiro. So he's another top-notch character. I'm very intrigued to see, him in the, second season. Alright, so that concludes our character category. All in all, the characters are extremely interesting and engaging, and their development is just so entertaining to watch. And this show honestly wouldn't be half of what it is now without those characters and how interesting they are. they definitely help. They really help make the show what it is. All right, so let's move into our final category. So this is where we deviate a little bit in terms of spoilers and non-spoilers, right? So we're going to start off with the themes of the story, right? So this is now I'm not going to get into spoilers with this, right? This is going to be all just, you know, the themes of the story. It won't really spoil anything plot wise or anything like that. That will be after we get into this. All right, so we're gonna start off talking about the themes then, and then we'll talk about the plot later. All right, so the themes of this story, of course, as I've talked about, is, you know, more being morally gray, right? Like that morals aren't, you know, black and white, right and wrong, right? That they are much more complex than that, right? You know, understanding the nuance of everything, and that, which is something that, you know, that is very topical in today's age. You know, I see a lot of people, you know, I see it everywhere where people are trying to make things, you know, right and wrong, like clear right and clear wrong, but the world just doesn't work like that. The world's far more complex than that. You know, everything is, you know, shades of gray. You know, it's there's nuance to every situation. You know, and it's not you know, there's not any clear, you know, answer to anything. You know, it's, you know, it's very topical to, you know, today, and also to where you know, to where it's, you know, it's set, the timeline is set, which brings me to another, you know, thing, the music. Now the music of this show kind of gives you, you know, makes sense when you understand when it is. This is back during, you know, to put it into terms, you know, it's the way I understand it, because, you know, I live, you know, in America and everything. It's during the Vietnam War, you know, the 60s and 70s, right? And if you know anything, I mean, fuck, we had that goddamn, you know, there was the music festival Woodstock, you know, and there's all this, like, you know, all the political music that came out back then and everything, and just like how we were, you know, the, you know, the protests and everything, you know. That's you know, how I understood it based on, you know, where I lived, and, you know, and it's even true. I've seen people that, like, it makes a lot of references to, like, the student protests back during that era. You know, it was a time of, you know, peace and wanting to get past, you know, the wartime and everything. And so it's just like, you know, and music was a way that a lot of us, you know, that everyone expressed that. And so that's why the music is so important, because this is, you know, that's the time period where it takes place, and, you know, it is very much in line with how, you know, with the, you know, the themes of the, you know, the rest of the show is, you know, and so the theme, you know, so the music plays a very heavy part, and it plays a very big part in the show, in kind of like showing you what kind of environment, you know, we're in, right? You know, this is a time period we're in, and even though this is an alternate Earth, you know, that had a totally different war, and there's superhumans and everything like that, it's not that much different from how it was back during that time period in our world. And, you know, and music is kind of like that connector, right? That, you know, it connects that, you know, theme, that idea and theme to us. You know, it reconciles what happened in, you know, our world to what happened in, you know, this alternate Earth. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is a theme that things have to change. Throughout the series, we see things, you know, we see, like, how things are in this world and everything like that, and it's almost like the Superhuman Bureau is just trying to maintain that, right? And we see throughout the, you know, development of the series that it can't stay like that. You know, there's a thing that things have to change. We have to move forward, because keeping things how they are is not going to fix anything. You know, it's not going to solve any issues. So there's this, you know, there's the theme of moving forward, and that one is also done very well. To kind of summarize the themes and everything, the biggest theme of this show is definitely the theme of, like, things are not so black and white. Things are not so right and wrong. It's far more complex than that. And that is the biggest theme, and it's done extremely well. This is part of the reason why I love this show so much, is because it's done so well. It's conveyed so well. and it's such an, and always creates such an interesting and engaging, plot, and it's always so, it's always so topical to, like, nowadays, because that's conversations that we have over and over, because people try and make things, set in stone like that, but it can't work like that. So all in all, the themes of the show are conveyed very well, and work extremely well, and they're topical to today, and they're always, and they create such an interesting discussion topic. We can talk, to talk about, and everything. Like, these themes create a dialogue that, sometimes, other themes don't do the same thing. They can't create the same kind of dialogue that these themes can create. And so the show portraying these themes very well, and having these themes, just yes. Alright, so now we're moving into spoiler territory, and we're going to talk a bit about the plot, some plot points and everything. I'm going to try and keep it, not going to try and talk too long about it, or spoil it too much. Even though people who are watching this should already be, should have already watched it. But let's get into it. So, I know earlier when I summarized, or when I talked about Jiro, and I said he's the only human. Yeah, we all know that's not true. Jiro has this beast inside of him, or whatever. He has the most in terms of, like, the plot of the show. Like, I'm like, first off, what the fuck is in him? And the nice little correlation at the end where Jiro is the bomb of Hiroshima. Nice, that was a nice little touch. In terms of the plot, I mean, really, some people complain about the nonlinear storytelling and everything. I'm like, no, it worked out well. It was a great way of foreshadowing what's to come, especially teasing like the second season and everything like that, because that's where we're going to get all the blanks filled in for like the future scenes that we've seen. We basically got the past filled in, right, in this first season, right? We got inklings of the future and everything, but we got the past filled in and everything like that. We reached the point, and this is what I knew was going to happen. We were going to reach the point at the end of the season where Jiro did that. He changed his mind, right? Because at the beginning I was like, how the fuck does he go from this dude who's like, yes, superhuman Jiro, to like being like, no, I'll never return. It's like, I can't do things like this anymore. I'm just like, I knew we were heading to that point, that turning point of the show. That was going to be the end of the first season. Was going to be the turning point of Jiro. Also, I'm kind of disheartened over the idea of Kiko being that demon personality being her real personality. I like the nicer one better. But that's just that's just some ramblings of mine. To get into a more concrete talk of the plot. The plot's really good. I honestly can't see where it's heading, because I knew in the first season it was heading to that point, and we got to that point very well. Like I talked about in the pacing, when they introduced Claude and everything, they could have, it just wasn't as integrated as well with the rest of the show, just because a lot of the arcs and everything were kind of contained to an episode. So things were dealt with very with that. There wasn't a lot of for a show that kind of has an overarching plot. There wasn't enough of the overarching plot being spread out enough. It was kind of all contained to the end, and so there wasn't a lot of build up to Claude being kind of like the final the final enemy of the finale. Like, I mean, as soon as he showed up, I knew he was going to be, but it just wasn't, there wasn't that build up there, and so that was a big thing where I thought it kind of suffered. But putting that aside, I mean, the plot was very interesting. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I could talk for hours and hours. I could probably talk for a good hour about it, but I don't want to subject you guys to that. So we're just going to leave it at this, that the plot is entertaining. And honestly, I really can't do a good plot, review on it until the second season, because it's only half of it, Thus far, it was very good. It suffered a little bit from a little bit of the pacing, right? But other than that, it was really good. Since the characters are a big part of it, it's well developed, but I really can't give like a real final verdict on the plot, in and of itself until we get to the end. I mean, hell, I've been let down before. There was a lot of series that had like really good first seasons, and then they just kind of fucking fell apart in the second season. Fucking Valvrave and Aldo Zero. Disappointing. Valvrave was way more disappointing than Aldo Zero. I could come to terms with Aldo Zero. Fucking Valvrave was just like a fucking rage-inducing how utter shite that second season was. Yeah, I know, I'm ranting, but yeah. But yeah, so I can't really comment that much on how good the plot is or isn't, really until the second part comes out. So yeah, but contained in itself for this first season, while it has some pacing issues, the plot does very well in conveying in conveying what it wants to convey. So let's get into the conclusion, the final verdict of what I thought about this anime. So to summarize, I loved this anime. I mean, it was really good. I mean, the themes were right up my alley. They had really well developed characters and everything. Good soundtrack. The animation was on par. Even though it has some pacing issues, it was nothing like glaring. It was something that like was extremely detrimental to the show. It just, some of the build up would have been better if the pacing had been done slightly better. But hey, I mean, all in all, I mean, it did a great job. So the question you've all been waiting for: do I recommend you watch this anime? Absolutely. Please, if you have not seen this anime, go watch it. You won't regret it. It will make you. It'll entertain you, and it will make you think. And plus, there's already a second season now, so why not? Second season's going on right now. Go watch the first season, then you can get right into the second season. So yes, I absolutely recommend you watch this series. Alright, so let's get my final score for this anime. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. And the big reason for this is, like, even though, like, I love, like, the characters were really good, the soundtrack was done really well, the animation was really good, there were the pacing issues. It's just some of the build-up just wasn't what it should have been. If the pacing had been done just slightly better, this would have easily been, like, a 9.5 out of 10, near perfect, right? I don't like giving perfect scores to animes because nothing's perfect. I mean, not just animes, nothing really. Nothing's perfect. There's always little things that you can improve. So, but 8 out of 10 is my final score for this anime, and I recommend that you go watch it. Alright, so this has been my first review on an anime. I know it wasn't, the best review, but hey, it's my first time. I'm just trying to get it out. I'm just trying to get out, you gotta start somewhere. Just trying to get it out there. And I wanted to do it on this anime because I just watched it and it was really good and I enjoyed it. So I wanted to do it on an anime that I had enjoyed and just recently watched, so it was fresh in my mind. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this review, and keep watch because I will be posting my theory video for the new episodes of ReZero later today. And yeah, very entertained with the next two episodes are very good, so I have a lot of theories concerning that, so keep watch for that. And yeah, tell me what you thought about this series if you've watched it, and tell me what you thought about the review down in the comments. And yeah, if you enjoyed this, like it, and if you want to see more from me, subscribe. I've been Borra-mon, and I will see you guys later. Chris? Oh, holy fuck! Chris! Holy shit, I didn't expect that!
But there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track.
Oh fuck, man. Can we ignore him and just stay in here? Are we Chris? But we're Stanley, though.
There was nothing here. No choice to make, no path to follow, just an empty broom closet. No reason to stay.
I was hoping Chris was in there.